Hello, everybody. Welcome to the High Quality Fun podcast, where we tell stories worth sharing. First of all, I apologize if it sounds like I have no voice. I got invited to a football game earlier today, and I'm a little bit sick, so my voice is kind of gone. But we'll get through it. We'll struggle together. I could not hold off on having Shane on here to talk about some of his stories. Shane, how you doing today?
Fantastic. It's a pretty good Sunday, productive weekend. Getting ready for the next adventure.
I love it. Yeah, so Shane is the buddy that Jordan mentioned. If you listen to our previous episode, we had an episode where Jordan talked about a lot of his tales out in Utah, and Shane is the buddy that was always referenced throughout the show. He forgot his food on the trail hike up Mount Whitney. He was the guy that did he did a 2 tracking adventure in the snow from northern Utah to southern Utah, which I believe you guys just completed a week or two ago. Is that accurate?
We did just finish it. I finally had my own vehicle for it, which Jordan was pushing for, and it was a ton of fun. Honestly, the change in geography of Utah from north of all the mountains to the south in the desert, just an incredible time. Went pretty seamlessly, except we had one breakdown with the Razor, and we had like a 40-minute trail fix. The clutch broke, and took it apart, put it back together, got them going again, and finished down in Monument Valley, and had some awesome campsites along the way down in Valley of the Gods. Woke up with this beautiful sunrise with these just monuments, pillars out in the desert, and it was an incredible trip. So it's kind of cool to see that one to the finish and start it and finish it. And we're looking forward to doing the Oregon BDR next year. Jordan kind of mentioned that. So got the Utah one done, and we're going to do a week-long road trip and try to link up the Oregon one. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Yeah, if you guys want to hear more about that episode or that adventure, I'd suggest checking out the previous Utah episode with Jordan, but we won't dive into that too much. So Shane, I met through Jordan. It sounds like we actually went to the same college, but I graduated before him, and then he joined, or he went up there, met Jordan, and so we just missed each other by a year, I believe.
1 year.
And the thing, we just had an introductory call and just kind of talked through what we'd go through today, and it sounds like you have a lot of close calls, and you've learned a lot through your close calls, doing a lot of mountain adventures, either in the winter, hiking, snowboarding, whatever. But we want to kind of dive into those, good and bad, and just hear about the risks that come along with adventuring, and what you may have learned and how you kind of prepare for the worst. Maybe the first story we can go into, just because some of the audience is familiar, is you did the Mount Whitney trip with Jordan, and you previously had did that, and it went not smooth at all. So I don't know, maybe you can tell us about that, and then we'll just dive into individual stories from there.
Yeah. Everything's high quality fun until it's not, right? So I moved to Utah about 3 years ago, and since then I've kind of gotten to a lot of mountain activities, whether it's footboarding or trail running and mountaineering. And Jordan kind of mentioned there's 2 guys on that Mount Whitney trip that took their skis up there. Well, I was one of those guys. It was a riot. That second trip, I called it the redemption trip, because we got to ski 4,000 continuous feet of snow. It was amazing. We kind of everything that you'd want to happen happened flawlessly. I mean, we had great weather, awesome conditions for climbing. Everyone was in good shape. Everyone did really well. Jordan kind of referred to that one. I did forget my food. Second time that's happened to me now. It was terrible, but luckily I had good friends who were willing to offer me some snacks. And there was one guy at like 14,000 feet who he overheard me talk about me forgetting my food, and he gave me like a whole pound bag of beef jerky. He's like, "Here you go, man." So thankful.
I guess for the people who haven't listened to it, they hiked up Mount Whitney, which is the tallest mountain in the continuous 48, and he brought his split board up there so he could snowboard down from the summit. And I just think that's a lot of extra weight, but that's awesome that you did that. But keep going.
Yeah, it is a lot of extra weight, but it was so worth it to get down in 20 minutes and watch those guys kind of glissade down. And Jordan said by the end of the day he was going to get one.
That
After
doesn't shock
watching
me at
us
all.
enjoy that ride down. But yeah, that was, like I said, that was our redemption trip. The first trip we did, a bit headstrong. When I first moved out here, we were just going peak after peak and really getting after it, which was a ton of fun. And we just kept kind of ramping up the level, and we had got a permit to do Mount Whitney. This would have been in May of 2022. Yeah. So we were on our way out there. I realized halfway out there that I had never accepted the permits. So that was already the first like red flag. Like I looked online and it said they got declined, and I was like, crap, what's going on? I never accepted the permits, which was on me. And luckily there was a couple still open, and we had a group of 3. So we snagged those as we were halfway across Nevada. And we got up there, and there's a thing called the 50 Classic Ski Descents of North America. It's a book, and we've been kind of just for fun tagging some of those along the way. And Mount Whitney actually has this couloir that's like 1,500 feet tall. That is one of the classics in the book. So we were like, sweet, let's go tag one of these classics while we got this permit. And it was California and Utah's super low snow year. And we figured there would still be enough snow in the couloir to go. One thing we didn't consider is the Mount Whitney. There's 2 different routes. One's a standard trail that has 99 switchbacks from, you start at 8,400 feet and you do 99 switchbacks over 10 miles to get to 14.5, I think it is. And then there's the Mountaineers route. And the thing that we learned was that it is a route. It is not a trail. Without snow on it, we freaking struggled. Thing is we started way too late. We figured we'd start at like 6 a.m. And for reference, we started our last Whitney trip at, I can't remember, I think it was something like 1 a.m. or something like that. So we were already 5 hours behind. We started in the daylight, and we burned the coffee. Like, it's just a terrible start to the day.
There's like 3 red flags already, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just the red flags for one after another. And we started up, and we were only like 1.5 miles in, to the point we were free climbing with our skis on our backs, like class 3, class 4 rock climbing, just up these cliff ledges. And we're like, what are we doing out here? Like, this is crazy. And for reference, when we had all the snow last time, we just bypassed the entire thing. We just walked right up the snow, and the route finding was just abysmal. I mean, it was just trees and bushes, and there's no real trail. You're just kind of zigzagging through and across the stream, back across. And we ended up getting up to there's a series of lakes, and we got up to the first lake, I think around 11 a.m. And it was me, myself, my roommate, and then one of our friends that also lives out here. And she ended up throwing up at 11 o'clock. And I was like, are you going to make it? She's like, I'm fine. And I'm okay. So it was just another red flag. And that was, I think 11,000 feet. We got water, and we anticipated in getting more water at the upper Boy Scout Lake, which is around 12.5. And by the time we got up there, it was about 1 p.m. And the lake was frozen.
Oh, good.
So we had no way to get more water. We were already pretty haggard because we were, when you get an alpine start, you're going up in the dark of the morning, and the sun's not beating you down. Well, we were hiking throughout the whole day, so we were just, kind of exhausted already. And when we had the A-frame, because you A-frame your skis on your backpack, and every time you're trying to navigate through these rock fields, you're just getting bucked forward because the back of your skis are clipping the rocks. So you're trying to navigate through the path without getting thrown around. And so we were pretty worked at this point already. And we saw some guys coming down, and we were looking at the peak. We were like, oh, it's only 2,000 more feet. Like, we can make it. And we kind of start our way up. We look at this couloir, and we realize that we carried our skis all the way up there for like 1,000-foot patch of snow. There was nothing left up there, basically. I mean, it was such a small little patch that we were like, this is probably not worth it. And we just kept going because, we were, like I said, kind of headstrong. And what's that?
You're already there.
Right. We were like, we got the permits, we're here, like, we might as well do it. And we're on our way up, and, we see some guys coming down, and they're like, you guys got the permits, like, you got all day, just go for it. Good weather. And we're like, yeah, let's keep doing it. So I remember about halfway up, just like redlining the whole time. My heart's pounding going up this thing. I'm like, we're kind of racing time. Let's get up the gut and get up to the notch. And the notch is at like 14,000 feet or something like that. So it's a 1,500-foot climb up that couloir. And my roommate was so thirsty that he ended up like taking his water bottle, and he was sifting water off of the snow melt, and he's drinking like this brown, dirty water because he's so thirsty. And in hindsight, it sounds so silly, like, that we're still pressing on at this point. But we got past the snow. We had about another 500-foot climb to the notch of the peak, and we got up to the notch, and we dropped our skis at the snow because we were going to go back down, go up to the notch. And my friend Alex comes up behind us, and we realize that she's still got her skis on her back. And we're like, oh, this is kind of weird. And she gets up to us, and she's like, I refuse to go back down the way we came up. And we're like, well, that's kind of the plan. Like, we're going to go back down this way. Like, we'll get you down. And she's like, I'm not doing it. So we're like, okay, well, we have the choice to like go back down the mountain to pick up our skis to keep going. Hindsight, we should have just bailed, but we kept going. And they both wanted to split the group up. I was pretty hesitant about it. I was like, I think this is a bad idea. After the trip, I will never split up.
What did you have?
We had 3. So it was me, my roommate, and then our friend Alex. And I was so hesitant about splitting up the group. I just was not, one of those gut feelings that didn't feel right. And they were both adamant on it. And I was like, all right, like, she planned on taking that 99 switchback route back down, and we were going to go back down the way we came, go pick up our skis. And so we ended up, Jordan kind of mentioned it in the first video, the previous podcast. There's kind of 2 ways to go up. When we were up there the first time, there was no snow up there, so we didn't have to go either way. It was clear of snow, but it involved some pretty technical scrambling. And we didn't want to bring our skis through that section because we didn't want to have our skis while we were rock climbing. And it was funny because we ended up carrying her skis anyways, because she was kind of nervous about having them on her back. So me and my buddy both had a ski on our back.
Oh my God.
And we made it through it. We linked up with another group of climbers, which was good because they were going back down the standard route. And so we're like, this is good. Alex, you can go back down with them, and you have some other people that you can go with, that you're not just alone. And we had good phone service out on the mountain. It was, good weather, had good phone service. We all had charged phones. Like, we're like, we can stay in contact. We'll be okay. But we were so haggard by the time we got to that summit. I took like a 3-minute GoPro video, and I have zero recollection of taking it. We were all extremely dehydrated, and those 14ers, man, like, it's something different. Like, the Colorado 14ers and Mount Whitney, like, once you get up that high in elevation, it really takes a toll. Like, you notice it, you breathing heavy, and anything above 13,000 feet, you really start to feel it. And we're up there, and we meet this other group, and we split ways. And as we're walking off the peak, I start hallucinating. I see a pack of dogs that's not there try to attack me. And I'm like, wow, this is not good. And we start our way down, and my roommate, he was barely even talking. I was pretty haggard mentally and physically, but spiritually, I was still really there. So I kept encouraging him. And it's not like him to not be super positive and chatty. And I was like, wow, that's not good. And at one point, he looked at me and said he was seeing earthquakes.
Oh my gosh. So he's hallucinating too.
Yeah.
When you're hallucinating from dehydration like this, like, it sounds like you were aware that those dogs were not there.
It scared me, yeah, because it was like a brief moment where I had it was like a flash of like them trying to, like, I don't know, it was like they were jumping at me or something, and then it went away, and I was like, wow, that's like, obviously there's no dogs up here, like this it's not real. And we made it back down to our skis right at dark. So we summited at 6 p.m., by the way. So it was way too late. And again, no water. We got back down to the couloir that we were going to try to ski, and it was completely bulletproof frozen ice, unskiable. Like, we did like 2 turns, and it was just scary. And we're like, there's no way, like, we're going to get hurt. So we put all our stuff back on, start carrying the skis again, never used them again the entire day. And the thing about carrying the skis is, like, instead of having a 15-pound vest or backpack, my backpack was 40 pounds. So it was a freaking haul to carry that thing up there. And luckily, we got down to the bottom of the couloir, and there were some climbers there that were kind of posted up, and they had put up camp. And we walked up to them, and they're like, "You guys look rough." And we're like, "Yes, like, we are really in bad shape." And we're like, "Do you have any water?" And they're like, "Yeah, like, here, take some water." And they gave us a full liter of water, and we split it. And it was like, it's probably honestly the most grateful I've ever been for water in my life. And
It brought you back to life too. Did that immediately just lift your spirits?
It did. It was kind of confidence inspiring, honestly. And it was, I started to get a little nervous at this point, because I had got another climber's phone number that Alex went down with on the other side. And I tried calling them both or texting them both numerous times, no response. So I was kind of like, well, that's weird. Like, maybe they're just focused on what they're doing and not really, checking their phones or whatever. But no response. And I was kind of like, that's weird. Like, it kind of just triggered a red flag in my mind. I was like, that's kind of, it's not awesome. I wanted to hear from them, on the way back down. Because that was our plan. It's like, we got good communication, we can keep talking. And so we kept making our way down. And I think around like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, we finally got back to there was a river or a creek crossing, and I had some water tablets, thankfully, that I keep in my running, or my kind of like emergency kit. And so we were able to drink a ton of water. So we just kind of sat there, and Eric he kind of looked at me, and he's like, "Dude, if there was any type of worse weather out here, or if we were in any worse shape, like, this is borderline calling search and rescue right now." I'm like, yeah, it's not good. And we realized the whole time I had just a pounding headache. Like, on the summit, my head was just throbbing, and it was still at that point. And I was like, what elevation are we at? Because the best thing you can do in that situation is just to get down, like the fastest you can get down in elevation. And we realized we're still at like 12,700 feet or something ridiculous. And we're like, this is not good. And we sat down there, and we didn't want to move. We're like, we're so tired. And then the next thing I remember is we're working our way down, and it felt like about 20 minutes went by, and we were well hydrated again. Our spirits lifted. We're cracking jokes again because we hadn't talked. I mean, neither one of us were talking most of the way down. And, we're going through the dark of night, and I'm like, Eric, what time is it by chance? And he's like, dude, it's 2:30 a.m. I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
what? Like, we're still out here? And we're making our way down, and people are starting to climb up for the next morning, and they're like, good morning. And I'm like, is it? And Eric's like, good evening.
Wow.
And
Yeah, because your last one, you started at 1 a.m., right? So
we started at 1.
you're
Yeah.
overlapping.
Yep. We got down to the car at 3:30 a.m. We were out there for 21 and a half hours or something like that. And I'm expecting to see Alex back there. I figured they took the easier route down. They're going to beat us to the car. She's not there. I'm like, all right, that's concerning. I try calling. I've been trying to call and text, no response. So I'm kind of starting to get a little worried here. And Eric and I couldn't walk. I'm like, even if we wanted to go find her right now, like I can't move. Like my legs are just shattered. And both of us just passed out in the front seat of his car at the trailhead. And I'm expecting throughout the night, like she's going to show up and knock on the window and be like, hey, like I made it back. Woke up at 9 a.m. and she's still not there. I was like, oh man, this is not ideal. And I was kind of worried about it. And I'm like, Eric, at what point do we start worrying? And he's just like hanging out, making coffee, cooking breakfast. He's like, dude, don't worry about it. She's fine. And I'm like, we haven't heard from her. Like, it's not awesome. And I was, and 10 o'clock rolled around, 11 o'clock. And I'm like, dude, we got to pick a cutoff time that if we don't hear anything or see her here, we got to go get help. We got to get search and rescue or start going up there the other way and try to find her. And, it's weird because your mind always, at least my mind always goes worst case. I'm like, why are they not picking up their phones? And,
Absolutely. Most people are like that, where they just think of the worst possible scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. I found it super weird because they had good phone battery and all that. And 1 o'clock rolled around, and I got a phone call from her brother, who I went to school with, who I was friends with from Michigan Tech. And he's like, she'll be at the trailhead in 45 minutes. I'm like, thank God. So she had actually gotten someone's Garmin and got a hold of him to get a hold of me. And what ended up happening is they never made it off of the 14,000 foot plateau by the time the sun went down. So when they started to try to go back down the standard route, the whole couloir was covered in snow, or the whole switchback area at the top. So there's just this huge wall of snow that they tried to go down, but it was completely frozen. So they're like, they kind of made the decision fast that like, if we're not going down this tonight, then we're staying up here. So they ended up digging a hole under a rock in the snow and sleeping there at 14,000 feet. And luckily, the strangers that she was with had extra layers. So they all bundled up and huddled together under the snow, or under the rock in the snow, and slept until the sun came up. And in the morning, they started working their way down, and she had her skis still, and she waited for the snow to heat up. And then she skied like 1,500 feet down and walked out. And when she got to the trailhead, I was like, we're going to have to take her to a mental institution or a hospital or something. Like, she's got to be traumatized. And she's like, I got to ski today. I was like, so are you kidding me? Like,
So
she was all excited. I was like, well, that could have been the best possible outcome of that situation. But what ended up happening is their phones died. It was so cold up there that their phones just completely died. The batteries went dead, and their phones all shut off. Never were able to get a hold of them.
I can't even imagine that. That is unreal. They might have had a better time than you, honestly. Like, they got comfortable.
I think they did.
It was probably like so disastrous for a hot second, but when they had that dug out and they actually got comfortable and laid down, everything was peachy, where you guys are still brute forcing down the mountain.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So when we talked beforehand, we wanted to dive into, risk and dangers, and you very much just laid out a lot that can go wrong when you're mountaineering.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume I don't know where this was in your move out to Utah. What did you learn from that adventure? Like, what did you change going into the next one? And then maybe we can just talk about other mishaps that changed how you do some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, kind of checking your ego in the mountains. Like, the mountains don't care if you are having a good day or a bad day. The mountain's still gonna beat you up if you're not smart about it. And another huge takeaway from that trip was just like the simple thing of having a turnaround time. It's like, we're starting up something and we don't get to the summit or a checkpoint by this time. It's time to turn around and come back down. Like, no matter how we're feeling, even if we're feeling good, like, if we don't have the time to do it, like, we're going to start coming back down. And that last Whitney trip we did, we actually did have a turnaround time, and we beat it by like an hour, which was calculated. And we're like, all right, there was a weather system coming in that day, the second time we did it. And I think it ended up never actually coming through, but there was a potential of a storm coming through. So we were like, we got to be down certain time. Since that trip, all of us got Garmin satellite communication devices. That was a big one. So I don't go out in the mountains anymore without a way to contact the outside world, whether it's I can text off of it, or it's a simple SOS device. If something were to happen, you can get the help that you need if something happens.
Yeah, the two things that come to mind, and I have no story that's that life-threatening, I guess, but two things that come to mind is my dad. He's a car nut, and he always kind of preps for the worst, right? You go on a road trip, it's like, oh, do you have all your tools? Did you check the tires? Is your spare tire good? He just like goes through his routine checklist in his mind to check for everything. And I mean, shit, it was even for two-stroke vehicles, right? Did you check the oil? Did you check the oil? It's an old system. Did you check the oil? And that's been kind of ingrained in my mind, because every time we go on a trip, I mean, shit, we went on a camping trip where we towed a pop-up out to Colorado for a wedding, and even had a spare tire for this new pop-up that we had. But we blew our tire, changed that out, and the spare tire was so bad we blew that out within the next 5 minutes, and now we have to get our pop-up on the side of the road with our two kids in 95-degree weather to town to try to find two new tires so we can change them out and keep going. I guess and then yeah, like you learn off that, right? You learn from the experiences more than you learn from people telling you. It's like, all right, Dad, whatever. All right, whatever.
Right.
But after that, I found out, and this is like a no-brainer now, but it's a smaller tire. You're not allowed to drive as fast on it. So we were probably beating those things up, driving our normal speed limit, especially with how hot it was. It was 95 degrees hauling out there.
Oh yeah.
I mean, another one, like I said, he says, always change the oil. And we both went to school at Michigan Tech. They get a lot of snow up there. I bought a piece of crap snowmobile so I could ride the trails that are up there. And we went out one time, and I noticed my sled's being a little weird. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm like playing with the brakes, playing with the gas. We're maybe 10 miles from the house. And I look through the grates and I see glowing orange. Like, what is going on? So I just shut it down, pull off to the side, rip the hood up, start chucking snow at it. It turns out that my brakes were seizing just a little bit.
Oh
And
wow.
so they were pinching on the I don't even know what you call it. They were pinching on the brake, whatever. And so they were just heating up, and it was glowing.
Like the rotor.
Yeah.
I don't know much about snowmobiles, but
I think it is called a rotor, like on a truck, it's just a rotor, right? But
yeah.
On a snowmobile, it's belt driven, so it's a little bit different. But anyways, rip the brake pads off. My buddy cannot start his sled, so I'm pulling him back without brakes, and he's braking for me. Eventually, we get to a road. We bring a truck up. We load it up, and I'm like, "Well, that sucked, but had friends there to help me out. I hope I didn't ruin their trip." Fixed a month later, or a few weeks later, I fixed all the brakes. It's running good, and I, get ready to go out, and turns out that when that thing glowed, it burnt a hole in my brake, not my brake, my oil canister, my oil reservoir, and
Really?
oil leaked out. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
5 miles out, my engine seizes up, and that sled is totaled essentially. And I just hear my dad in the back of his head, always check the brake fluid, or not the brake fluid, the oil, always check the oil. And I did. I filled it to the brim when the brakes seized up, but I didn't check it between those times because I figured it was still to the brim. But turns out it burnt a hole in the bottom and leaked all over the place. So yeah, like stupid stuff like that, you just you go through and you just learn to always be prepared for.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a bit of a tangent, but I mean, I guess I could go into one more. Your buddy was saying that, or you were saying that your buddy wasn't talking on that
Yeah.
trip. He's getting real quiet, and he's normally the chatty one. Um, I went on one elk hunting trip, and there was a point where there was so much deadfall, so much trees stacked on top of each other. There was like four high, and we got into the thick of this so badly. They were like wet. It was raining. You had to climb over every single one. I was done. I was with my father-in-law, and he turned into the optimistic, where I'm always the optimistic. He's the negative one. And he's like, well, what are we going to do? We can't just sit here and die. We have to keep going forward to get out of there.
Oh my
And
God.
that was exhausting. We got back after dark, and everyone looked at us. What happened to you? That's a whole story that I need to tell at another time, but just funny, like hearing the willpower and how much that like helps a mood. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
bunch of
funny, like,
tangents. God,
yeah, just kind of when you get that haggard and beat down, like kind of where your mind goes, trying to stay positive, and someone's got to keep pushing the group forward. It's like there's nothing you can do besides keep going, you know.
yeah, it's that or die.
It is
Um,
funny what you were saying about the about kind of being prepared and stuff. And um, my dad, he's always kind of been into hiking, and he's always been into climbing up into the mountains to go trout fishing and stuff like that. And I lift up his backpack. I'm like, why is your backpack 60 pounds? He's prepared for everything. He has like double of everything. And I'm always like, you don't need all that stuff. Like, why do you have all of this garbage? And my mom and my stepdad too, that will do some hiking sometime or some peaks. And they've got like so much extra water and all this extra stuff that, I'm like, you guys don't need this stuff. But the one time you do need it, you're happy to have it.
yeah, it's like, how prepared do you get?
You
Oh
can
my gosh.
obviously overdo it. I mean, a 60-pound pack and carrying a bunch of extra stuff is a little overkill, but when you do need it, it's nice to have.
I'm sure for him too, he's doing just a mediocre hike to find a remote fishing spot where you're trying to take your entire daylight out to hike something, or to do some backcountry skiing.
Yeah, there's kind of a safety in going fast too. I mean, the less time you're out there is kind of the better. So if you can move lighter and faster, there's kind of an advantage to that versus being heavy and slow and um, having all this extra gear. But that's a twofold scenario too, because if something does happen, you really wish you had that stuff.
Before the call, you were talking about an avalanche you experienced, and how it sounded like you were prepared in that case. But can you just tell us about that story, and maybe what you would have had to do if your buddy did get caught in that avalanche?
Yeah, that was an eye opener for sure. I had starting I started getting into backcountry skiing a little bit in Oregon. I lived out there for a bit, and picked up kind of a cheap setup and kind of started getting out and learning a little bit about it. But it was always in the summer, so there's really no inherent avalanche danger. Just kind of like going and playing on the glaciers, having fun. And when I got to Utah in 2020, I started getting into backcountry out here. And the interesting thing about the Rocky Mountains, like with Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, is there's typically major avalanche problems because of the intense like sun we get out here. So there's all these freeze thaw conditions in the mountains, and what that does is it basically creates all these weak layers in the snow as the season progresses. So you get this one freeze thaw at the beginning of the season, and now you have this weak layer, and you're just stacking snow on top of it to the point where you have these, huge snow depths that can just shear off the mountain, which is really intimidating. Honestly, it's kind of scary. So getting into it out here was a little intimidating at first, and I kind of had this like call it boogeyman fear. It's like every time you go out, it's kind of, I didn't know a ton about it. I had taken an introduction course to avalanche safety and things like that. It wasn't a super in-depth course. I'm actually taking one of those.
Take this course? Was this after or before the Mount Whitney trip? And like, I guess, yeah. Why did you want to take the avalanche course? Was it just because you were getting into this hobby?
Yeah, I would seriously recommend everyone that gets into the backcountry on skis and snowboards to take, even snowmobiles too, like to take a course just to know. It's so hard to explain. Like you can look at terrain and know, this is something I want to avoid, or this is something that's safe. And the courses kind of walk you through that and teach you about it and teach you how to read an avalanche forecast. The avalanche forecast is posted daily by the Utah Avalanche Center, and they kind of give you a rundown of what aspects, so like northeast or south, whatever direction is safe and which one's dangerous and which ones you should avoid. And those classes really dive into what kind of terrain you can be in safely and what you should look out for. So I took that class. I took just like a 1-day introduction class when I first moved out here. So that was before I got into any of this stuff. That was like before all these big trips that I've done. And the more in-depth one I'm taking this winter, which is I think like a 3 or 4 day course to really learn a lot more about it. But nothing replaces time in the mountains and just like understanding it and being out there and seeing what's going on. So when I had first started, like I said, I kind of had this boogeyman fear of, avalanches can happen and it would be a terrible way to go out. And it's kind of freaky. Like I'm claustrophobic. Like I can't imagine being sucked down in an avalanche. It sounds absolutely terrible. Because realistically, if you go down and you get sucked under an avalanche, I think they say that the time frame that you have by the time you get buried until someone digs you out is about like 5 to 10 minutes. That's all you get.
Holy crap.
So another thing is like you have to rely on that person that you're with to be skilled enough to find you and dig you out in 5 to 10 minutes, which is very intimidating in itself. So I kind of had this like boogeyman fear going out there. So every time we go out, I was kind of like skeptical of a lot of things that we were doing. And I didn't really have kind of like a local legend, if you will, or someone who is kind of a, super knowledgeable of the area. My roommate had been out here for a year and he was kind of like, oh yeah, I know to go here and know to go here, these places. And some of his risk tolerance was a little more excessive than mine. So he was kind of taking some bigger risks that I was kind of a little unsure of. And I was not really sure if that was, me just being worried about the conditions and the potential of an avalanche, or if, it was just like me just being worried about being out there, or if it was justifiable. Right. And this was I think my second season out here. And we had one of these avalanche problems where these decent sized avalanches were going off on a certain aspect. And it happened to be on it was like a specific eastern facing aspect. And the place that we like to ski was a southeast, so it's directly adjacent to it, right? And we skied it earlier that season and low avalanche conditions. Everything went well. It was great. And he kind of was like, "Oh, we skied already. It's good." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's midwinter now. Things have changed. Like, I don't really think it's a great idea." So there was a considerable probability of avalanches on that eastern face, but the southeastern face had a lower rating. It was like, oh, it was one notch lower, like it's a moderate risk. And I was like, well, it's right next to it. What's the difference there, really? And I once again had the boogeyman fear while we were going up. We went up like 3,000 feet and got onto this mountain ridge line. And what you like to do when you're dropping into terrain is, you always go one at a time, in the sense that if someone would get caught, that, you have the rest of your team to go down and help out in case there was a burial. And what that person does is they'll ski the line first and then get out to an island of safety, where if that slope would slide, they're out of the way. And so my other roommate, he had gone down, he skied it first, and he did well. I mean, the snow was good, and he went out to the side and everything was great. And I was strapping in my snowboard at the top while my other roommate, he was dropping in, and I just hear, and I was like, that's weird. Like, what is that sound? And
Before you go into, I assume that was the actual avalanche breaking, but how steep are these drop-offs, right? Because if the sun's beating down on this and there's getting snow packed on top and on top, it's got to be an overhang, right? So you have just like this big knob of snow at the top, and then it's almost like caved out at the bottom, and you're just dropping into the cliff. Is that accurate or no?
not exactly. So this slope was probably right around 32 to 35 degrees, and anything under 30 degrees in slope is typically not steep enough for an avalanche to slide, because the weight of the snow, there's not enough slope pitch for it to slide, so it just will sit there. So if it's like a high avalanche kind of day and you're worried about it, you just go ski something below 30. Don't have to worry about it. Relatively safe.
You're not jumping off a cliff or anything. You just climb to the top of this peak, this very shallow, not steep cliff, but it's backcountry. It's untouched. The thrill of it is that no one's been there. You get to carve your own path.
Yeah, it's really a free for all. I mean, it's the total opposite of resorts. Like, it is really just, you're out on your own, fresh lines. It's awesome. You choose your own adventure. So the appeal of it is really cool. I mean, you're out by yourself. There's no one else around typically. And
you bust your ass to walk up or out there, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Climb up. This slope was, I mean, it was just a typical mountain peak. I mean, it was just gradually sloped. Like I said, it was steep, 32, 35 degrees, which is in the potential range for sliding. And
you were holding your hand up, and that's like 60 degrees, right? It's
probably, yeah, that's steep. I mean, 30 degrees is probably something like that, but
yeah. It was greater than 45. So between 45 and 90 degrees. Let's just say 60 degrees. Yeah, that's pretty steep. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so
you're strapping in.
We're strapping in. I hear this sound, and I look down and I realize I see this like red balloon in the middle of the slope. I was like, what is that? And I realized it was my buddy's airbag. He had pulled his airbag, his avalanche airbag, so it inflated, and it was him sliding with, I realized his whole face had just ripped out, and he's going down with the snow. And I was like, oh my God, this is real. And I whipped my backpack off. I pulled out like I had my beacon ready to try to find him, and my shovel, my probe. And I watched him, and luckily his airbag kept his torso upright, and he was able to ski out to the side of it. And it still took him probably 200 feet. And this whole thing was probably 400 feet wide. It went down into this gully, and the snow pile at the bottom was like probably 15 to 20 feet deep.
Wow.
And if that was the case and he was in there, it would have been a very, very bad day. I mean, it was a close call. Trying to find him would have been, I was ready, but we would have had to act very fast. The snow was like, I mean, probably 1.5 feet deep along the whole face. So you imagine that volume of snow just piling up at the bottom of this valley. And luckily he was able to get out to the side and went up to him. He was obviously extremely shaken up, and I was just glad he was okay. That was a scary close call.
Can you explain some of the gear? So did you all have, what'd you call it, balloons?
Yeah.
Life vest?
Yeah. It's called an avalanche airbag. And what happens is like, if you know you're going down, you pull this lever and it inflates a balloon out of your backpack. And that actually creates buoyancy for you. And larger objects and avalanches float to the top, which seems counterintuitive, but it actually, there's like I don't know, it's like 80 to 90% chance that it actually brings you to the top versus like pulling you down. And the other thing we carry is a beacon shovel probe, which is standard for avalanche safety. So everyone's got a beacon on them and you're constantly beeping. So you do a beacon check at the beginning of your day, and you basically have that beacon and you can go find them in the snow, and it kind of shows you have a range of a number, and that number gets smaller as you get closer to them.
Like
and
a
then you pick
glorified
out
metal detector?
It really is. Yeah, you're just metal detecting in snow for your buddy. And then you get out this basically like a 10-foot aluminum pole that is it breaks down. So you get that out and you put it all together, and then you start probing, and you probe in a circle until you get a probe strike, which is where you can actually feel like a difference versus like the ground versus an article of clothing or something like that. It feels different. And so that's where they are, and then you just start digging with your shovel.
Wow. That's wild. I can't even, yeah. Did you have a GoPro or anything on this thing?
I don't think so. I don't think I had the GoPro out that day. I might have a couple videos of the aftermath, but I don't think I recorded that one.
Yeah, because before you explained that gear, I was just thinking you'd have to spot where they landed, and I mean that's a lot more reassuring that you could actually find them, probe for them.
As engineers, I really feel like we could develop that technology better. It seems so archaic, just trying to metal detect for someone under the snow, but we've been thinking about it. I can't think of anything better.
Without any service, I'm not sure, man. You always have to risk the service aspect of it.
Right.
Is the probe always on, or do you have to actually activate it?
The beacon is always, so when you're at the trailhead, there's two modes. So there's obviously off, and then there's transceive and search. So when you're in transceive, you're actually projecting signals.
Gotcha.
And so you always do a check at the beginning of your day to make sure that yours is working and people can pick you up. And obviously search mode is when you're trying to find another beacon.
That's cool. You were talking about, so when you're doing these backcountry hikes, are you kind of hiking from the bottom up, or how do you access that? And the reason I ask is because I've done one backcountry hike with a snowboard at Loveland Pass in Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that starts off at 12,000 feet, but it's interesting because you almost get right to the top, right? You're driving the switchback of this old pass. They now have a hole through the mountain, and that's how everybody gets through the mountain, but this road still exists. And you pretty much can go park at the top, take your photos, whatever. It's gorgeous. And my brother-in-law, who actually passed away, we won't get into that, but he took me there before he passed away and had me hike it. And yeah, they went to a peak way off in the distance. I remember being so freaking winded, just carrying this backpack, and there was no prep for avalanches or anything. He saw the peak that he wanted to go to, and he dove off this cliff face. And I mean, hearing your story right now, I feel like there's a full on risk that something could happen. We went a year afterwards and did the same peak, and one of my buddies went off of it, and he took the drop wrong. So it was kind of like jumping off a cliff, and he hit the ground and spun out, finally caught himself and was able to snowboard the rest of it. But there was definitely a little bit of snow that followed behind him. It was, nothing like an avalanche where you heard that big zing noise.
The thing about the avalanches is they don't really make a sound. It's weird.
Oh, okay.
I heard the inflation because the airbag has a electronic fan in it. That's what I heard. But the avalanche, I didn't hear the avalanche at all. Like, it already happened, and then I heard the airbag. That's the crazy thing, is you don't hear them. They're pretty much silent.
That's
unless they're really big, which is then it's a whole nother ballgame. But yeah.
I would have expected like a crack or something, just that much mass falling off. But okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was not confident enough, and I was winded. So even snowboarding out in Colorado was a little much for me, just going to the ski resorts. But
the elevation is a butt kicker coming from the Midwest. When I first got out here, I felt it for sure.
Yeah, I just didn't have the experience just riding that stuff. I'm significantly better now. I've gone a lot more since then, but I was going from, Michigan hills, which are just dumpster piles, to the mountains, and I just have to learn how to navigate and get confident on a snowboard with the steepness. So I was not against hiking out to that ridge, but when I got to that ridge, I gave them all a high five, and I walked down to the valley between the two ridges and went down from there. And it was awesome riding from the peak or just like where you park at the top down Loveland is just awesome. And it was Eric, his name's Eric, his favorite spots because it was free. He was broke as shit. And you can literally park, gear up, hike as far as you want, ride down, and then you end up at a road and you just hitchhike on the way back up, and you get these freaking loonies that'll let you just hop in their truck bed and you just trust them with your life that they're not going to throw you off the cliff. And they're taking
Colorado hitchhikers.
What's that?
The Colorado hitchhikers.
Yeah. And I remember just shitting my pants, but being like, all right, you do this all the time. Why not? I'm just holding on, like bare knuckle gripping the truck bed of a stranger as he rips it through the mountains. And yeah, it was really cool. And we did not hike that every single time, but it was cool just riding that free resort, doing a couple runs and, powwowing with people crazy enough to do this stuff. But we did not have any avalanche gear when we did that. And I starting to hear about it. I feel like we're a little nuts.
Yeah, that's bold. That honestly, like, unfortunately, that's how a lot of people get in trouble, because they just see this sick terrain and they're like, we're gonna go ride that, that's awesome. And not really knowing. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I did the same thing when we first went out west. I was like, duck the rope, like, go do this sweet run, and it's out of bounds and blah blah blah. But not really knowing what avalanche gear was and what the real risk is. And coming from the Midwest, we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So it's very enticing to see this sweet, mountain to go snowboard and not really know what the real risks are there,
Did you ever go do Bohemia up at college?
I loved that mountain. Yeah. Okay. I would go there all the time.
For the listeners, there's a mountain in Michigan. Michigan doesn't really have mountains, but it's called Mount Bohemia, and it's the best way I've ever heard it. Right, there's a group of guys that went up there, and we saw them on the hill, and then we saw them at the bar later that night, my wife and I, and we went over and said, hi, like, you were at Mount Bohemia, right? It's like, yeah, we're over here for spring break. And we got to talk to him, and I pretty much asked him, like, why did you choose Bohemia over going out west? And they said that out west is amazing, and the altitude's better, and the runs are longer, but it's often groomed, it's crowded, it's so expensive. And Bohemia, it's still a bomb ass mountain. The runs are not as long as some of the ones you get out west, but it's freaking dirt cheap to ride there. It's all ungroomed, and it's such a unique mountain compared to anything else I've seen. So we're gonna be going this year. We're gonna find a babysitter or something, or bring her cousin up to watch the kids so we can do a few runs. But yeah, I'm very excited to get back up there.
That place is a hidden gem.
Absolutely.
I try not to tell too many people about how good it is. It's definitely getting busier, but it's funny being out west and having people. They're like, "Oh, you're from Michigan. You don't know what good snow is like," and I'm like, "Nope, nope."
Yeah, and it's
Don't want to tell them that Mount Bohemia gets like 300 inches of powder a year.
yeah, it's in a snow belt. It's right in Lake Superior, so it just gets totally dumped on. Yeah, I mean, half the reason that some of the ski resorts in the mountains get dumped on is because they're in some type of snow belt, but we have that unique one off Lake Superior.
Mount Bohemia's got some terrain too that's right on par with some of the resorts out west, which is pretty incredible for being a Midwest resort.
I like hearing that. I have not explored a lot of the different ski hills out west, and I'm definitely novice in the different types of ski hills you can go to. Maybe a little bit blessed that I'm close to Bohemia and get to keep going back there. So I guess what else do you want to go into? I know you have a couple other close call stories that we can dwell on, or we can just dive deeper into safety gear before we wrap up. I don't care where you want to take this.
Yeah, I've got I've got a few just like pointers on just choosing, being safe in the mountains. I could dive into a story that we've had where it was more of a high quality fun story. It was it wasn't nearly as risky or I guess as life threatening as the other two, but it was a fun one.
Yeah, go ahead, and then yeah, I'd love to hear the pointers, and maybe we can talk about some gear before we wrap everything up.
Yeah, yeah, we got this little fun thing that we do. It's just kind of like again, like with the classic ski descents, it's just kind of a little fun side thing that we like to do. Check a box if we're in the area, but we kind of do like the state high points too. So try to go to all the western state high points, and the Gannett Peak is the one in Wyoming. And that one is, I mean, Denali's obviously the craziest one. It's like 20,000 feet in Alaska. Mount Rainier is a glacier peak, and that's at 14 something. And Gannett is middle Wyoming. I think it's in the Wind River range. I think it's like 13,000 feet or something. And honestly, if you ever get the chance, the Wind River range in Wyoming is kind of slept on. It's such an incredible place. The thing that makes it so unique is it would be a national park if you could drive to it. It's truly incredible. Like there's no easy way in. To get into the thick of it, you're looking at a 20-mile hike in from any direction just to get into the kind of like the main area. And we tried to go do that summit in a 9-day weather window in the middle of August. So it was like end August, like August 22nd. And we got out there, and my buddy flew in from Detroit actually. And we had this one day of this 9-day storm cycle where we're like, there's a 2-hour window where it looks like the skies are going to be clear. Let's go for it. And we're on our way in, and we woke up that morning at the trailhead, and there was an inch of snow on the ground. We're like, it's August. What is going on out here? This is insane. And every group that we saw coming out of the mountains while we were going in just looked miserable, soaking wet, haggard. Like, they're like, what are you guys doing going in here? Like, turn around. We're like, no, we got this, And there was one group of climbers that had a rope with them, and they were like, yeah, we did a through hike and we climbed these peaks, and they're, you guys got this. Okay, sounds good. And we made it in there 20 miles on the first day, got up the next morning at I think like 4 a.m. or something, and we had to climb this 2,000-foot loose rocky like ridge line to get over, just to get into the main area of the peaks. And I remember going up that, and halfway up there was already like 6 inches of snow, and it was so socked in, like you couldn't see anything. I couldn't even see my buddy's headlamps in front of me. I just saw a glow in the distance of a light, and it was snowing, and I didn't have boots. I had trail running shoes, which was a
Okay.
terrible idea. And I don't know why I didn't have boots. I should have. I didn't think it was going to be, everyone's like, it's August, it'll be fine. My buddies both had boots. So they were fine. And we got up to the top of this first pass, and my buddy looks at me and he's like, are you good? And I'm like, if I can keep my feet between pain and discomfort, if I can keep it on the discomfort side, I think I'll be okay. And I had put bags in my boots or in my shoes to try to keep them dry because they were completely full of water from the day before. And we ended up, the skies cleared up and it was a beautiful sunrise, and the the plateaus up there are incredible. Have you been to Yosemite?
I haven't been to Yosemite, no.
It looks a lot like Yosemite. It's just like huge, like granite walls in the canyons and plateaus as far as you can see. And we're kind of like shimmying down. There are these crevasses that kind of go down the glacier, and we're kind of going around those, and we end up catching up. Ironically, there was no one else out there except for one group that was guided from Michigan. So these guys were from Michigan out there, which was cool to, have some fellow Midwesterners out there while we were, crazies going after this peak. And there was a snow bridge up there to get up to the peak that just had enough snow so that we could walk over it, over this crevasse. And it was like all open on the sides, and it was like this little bit of snow that you walk over and get to the other side. And we had our rope, and we were all roped up, and we made it up there. Sky was clear, super, super rewarding to see all the mountains. And we got back down, and within a half an hour, completely socked in again. Like we're in this little snow globe, and we're so far back there. And we started back up the glacier on the other side to get back to the pass, to get back to camp. And I remember one sketchy thing that we did that I'll never make this mistake again either. We were all these little crevasses, like they were short enough that you could step over. And so we were just walking over them all as we were working our way back up. And if my mom listens to this, she's not going to like hearing about this one. But we had one last crevasse to cross before we got back to the rocks. And it was just wide enough that you couldn't step over it. So you had to kind of walk across the snow to get across it. I'm the heaviest guy. My two buddies go in front of me. They're fine. I take my first step. I sunk to my mid thigh.
Oh my God.
I thought I was going in. It was really scary. I pulled myself out and it was fine. But ever since that, I'm like, we had the rope on our back. We didn't have a rope. We weren't roped up. And yeah, that one, me and my buddies, we don't talk about that one a lot. that was a bad one. But we made it back. We started going down, back down the rocks, and this place looks like Mordor, like the steep walls on the sides and the gates of hell unleashed, and it just starts thunder snowing and just crackling down on us. And normally we don't like to run down these steep rocks, and we were just cruising. We're like, I don't want to get struck by lightning. We're flying down. and just get completely soaking wet. And we get back to the tent, and my buddy, he decided to put all of his stuff, clear it up for like an hour. He put all of his stuff all over the rocks to dry out, in theory. And we got in the tent, I think at like 4 in the afternoon, and we were in the tent until for 12 hours until the next day. It never stopped raining and snowing the whole time. Every moment we woke up about every half an hour to push the tent back out because the snow was actually collapsing the tent. And we woke up in the morning, our sleeping pads were floating in water essentially. And everything outside that he left, I tried drying all my stuff out inside the tent or in the loft of the tent, and he left all of his stuff outside. So his jacket was frozen in the shape of the rock that it was sitting on. So all of his stuff was completely frozen. He had like some long john base layers for his legs and a puffy coat for his top, and that's all he had that was dry. And we just packed everything up. Like our hands were freezing at 4 a.m. We're like, we just got to get the heck out of here. And we made it back. It was sunny at the truck, and everything was peachy.
Oh my gosh, I got the heebie-jeebies when you're talking about that snow bridge and freaking falling in that crevasse. That's cool. I actually you mentioned Denali, and this is like very bittersweet, nothing super exciting here, but we went out to a wedding in Alaska this year. First time flying with our kids. We have 2 girls that are under 3, and we got to go and drive through Denali National Park, but we got roadblocked because you have to, there's a certain point where you cannot enter any further unless you're part of a tour or if you're hiking or biking yourself. And so we literally just like stopped where the buses could enter, and like we saw Denali, but it was so far away. It was kind of bittersweet. Still very gorgeous.
It's a huge mountain, isn't it?
Well, it was deceiving because we were so far away that we couldn't tell that it was the tallest mountain. Like you look at what is it? You look at a portrait of it, right? And this mountain looks taller than Denali because it's closer to you.
Gotcha.
But it was cool. I mean, there's limited things you can do until your kids are older. There was no way we were going to throw them on a bus for 6 hours and have them ruin everyone else's trip. They did great on the plane and the train that we did, but that was more plane. We didn't have a choice, right? But the train, we can move around and stuff, and we were able to entertain them.
Yeah, I give you guys credit. You're doing adventures on hard mode.
Yeah. The goal is to just like not pump the brakes while they're young, so that when they're older, we can start to do more intense stuff, and they like it. We saw some moose, and that was really cool. And I don't know, I honestly don't even think I fully appreciated that Denali was the largest mountain in the United or the Western Hemisphere. North America. Okay.
Yep.
I think I am only realizing that now after talking to you and Jordan that mountain is so freaking tall. I knew it was 20,000. I didn't know that was the largest.
The interesting thing about it too is that like a lot of mountaineers, is one of the hardest mountains to climb because it comes off of the seafloor. So it has 17,000 feet of climbing. It's not like you can, start at a certain elevation and go to the top. I could be wrong, but I think it actually has more prominence. Like the distance you climb is further than Everest.
Oh, wow.
It's lower elevation, but you have to climb higher than you would to climb Everest because it starts at such a low elevation.
I'll have to look that up after the show. That's interesting. Yeah.
That's cool. You got to experience that park.
It was cool. Driving it was just super bittersweet. We drove it in like, I don't know, 20 minutes. We stalled, parked a lot to check everything out and whatever, but it was good. Definitely want to go back. Is there any other gear that comes to mind that might be worth talking about before we wrap everything up? I'm very much fascinated by some of the stuff that you mentioned with the avalanche and you mentioned a first aid kit in the first story, but it didn't seem to help you out too much.
Yeah. Let's see what else I got. The avalanche beacon and safety system's kind of the most technical. It's kind of
And it seems like that's what all your adventures are primarily focused on, right? You're either hiking you're hiking to summit something or to snowboard or ski, I
oh
guess.
yeah, I should talk about that. So um, the when you're ski touring, there's a thing called ski skins, which basically it's like a one-way carpet. So it's got glue on one side and it has a one-way carpet on the other. So you stick it to the bottom of your ski, it allows you to go up but not slide back down.
Mm.
So those are super useful. So they call it ski touring. It's not, a lot of times, we'll say it's like hiking or ski touring, and that's what gets us all to these areas that we want to ski. I remember you and Jordan kind of briefly talking about ice axes and crampons, and those are fun. Those take you to some cool places.
Crampon is just the being able to shove something in the mountain to clip to, right?
Yeah, basically it's spikes for your feet, so they attach to your
Oh,
boots,
okay.
and it gives you traction, and you can climb water or snow, anything that gets steep and scary. You can kind of put those on your feet and keep going and kind of billy goat it and not have to worry about sliding.
Billy Goat it. I love it. Yeah, I've said this on another episode, but another reason that we're starting this is because I get to talk to people, hear cool stories long form, and learn a little bit about different things that I haven't even touched on before. I mean, shit, I learned a lot just by talking to you and hearing the bullshit that you've stuck yourself in.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes for worse, but
Not even for better, just for worse.
well, honestly, like the biggest takeaway is that you can walk away and have a good story, and you know unharmed, and learn a lot from it, and learn what to do for the next time, and take away
Yeah.
some learning lessons, and be better prepared, I guess, and have a better mentality going into things.
You were also saying that I think you wrote it down, but trust your instincts and don't always trust the people you're riding with.
Yes. Yep.
Be skeptical of the skill set that the people have. That I don't even know how to word it. Like that the people that you're traveling with, I guess, is what you said.
Exactly. And that comes down to, like, I mean, it's crazy because, like, here in the Wasatch, people really get into some crazy stuff, and the Wasatch Mountains of Utah, and it's a high avalanche danger day. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not doing anything above 30 degrees. And you go drive down the canyon, you see all these ski lines coming down all this steep stuff. And it's like, either they're crazy or they know something I don't, and they're far more experienced to know that this is safe, or they're, maybe I'm probably just crazy.
Just
Um,
batshit crazy.
yeah, like just kind of blindly following people into situations isn't always the smartest idea either. Yeah, vetting them out and making sure they have the skill set to not get you into some hairy situations. And also, yeah, like you said, just trusting your gut, and not, if something feels off, it's probably off. And there's no shame in, say, even if you're going out with people that are more experienced than you, and you don't feel right about something, like, there's no shame in saying, hey, I don't think this is a good idea today. And you can always go back and have a beer or a coffee and talk about it, and then go out when the mountains are allowing you to do it the next time, and talk about it and be in one piece.
I'm sure that's really hard to do too, because a lot of people plan these entire trips around the weather or what the mountain allows them to do, and if you get there and you can't do it, that totally sucks.
Oh
But
yeah, it's so
those
hard too. Like with the Mount Whitney trip, like that first time, we had the weather window, we had the permits, we're like, we're gonna do it no matter what. And it's like, there's always another time. And especially with like social media and people posting like, oh, we did this peak, and it's like, you want to do that peak, but sometimes you got to make the better judgment call and come back a later date, even though it does suck turning around. We've turned around plenty since some of these experiences, but it's, you can look at the peak, it's right there, you want to go do it, but you gotta, those are bittersweet for sure.
Your first time going doesn't even sound good. Like none of that sounds good except for the fact that you survived. And you will
No, it
always
was it
tell
was
that
awful.
story. You will always tell that story because of how horrible it is. But the second time, the one that Jordan told, just sounds much more enjoyable. And even though it was a rough time,
It was the same place and a completely different experience.
yeah, that's some perspective right there. Yeah, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up now. I mean, we've been talking for I think just over an hour. I know you're on Instagram. I've been kind of scrolling through some of your stuff. Why don't you just kind of share your page, share any final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up right there.
Yeah, my Instagram is _insane_Shane. Post a lot of fun snowboarding stuff on there and some of the adventures that I'm out doing in the mountains. So I don't post as much as I should, but I'm trying to be better at it. We got some decent content, but if you a lot of Jordan stuff I'm also included on, because him and I are doing a lot of the same adventures. So a lot of his pages I'm also on, and he's got some really good content. And then my buddy Dan, who I think you might enjoy having him on the podcast. He's got a lot of also, he's got more adventures than me. He's always out doing stuff. He's also from Michigan, and him and I are always, I mean, he comes out here a lot, and he's got a really cool YouTube page that's actually getting some traction, and that's called The Occasional Alpinist. And
Okay.
yeah, so he's got a lot of his videos are incredible, just great production quality. He's gotten really good at it. And yeah, I aspire to have some YouTube videos as good as his at some point.
I love it. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast. You are truly insane. I love hearing that you are staying safer with some of the stuff and learning from it. Hopefully some people can listen to this and make sure they buy that safety gear. Change your smoke detectors, buy a fire extinguisher, check
Have
your
a
tire
spare tire.
pressure.
Yeah, there we go. Check
Make
the
sure your
oil
tire is
in your
good.
snowmobile.
Yeah, all good advice. We don't want your house to burn down, but we also don't want you to fall off a mountain. So thanks, Shane. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.